Hi, y'all. Welcome back. Thank you for tuning in. Per usual, I really appreciate it. Also, thank you for those who send me messages relaying that the podcast has been helpful for them. I truly appreciate all of those little nudges because they are encouraging for me. So I really appreciate it. Today, I want to talk about something that happened recently. Khalil and I are like two peas in a pod, and we went out for dinner recently. And typically, I will say, Khalil, what do you want? And he'll mention one of the four items that he appreciates and enjoys eating only. And, we'll go about ordering that. But I have also made a point of nudging him to order whatever he would like on his own. So when the waitress comes to the table, I'll say, Khalil, what do you want? And I'll, nudge him to ask or to state what he wants for the waitress so that he can build that habit of speaking for himself. Also, side note, I want to do a podcast around like two things when it comes to nonverbal and semi-verbal autistic children, how it is so important that we don't talk around them or about them in front of them. Instead, include them in the conversation, because while their language verbally may be minimal, they hear you, right? And so that's a side note. That's a thing for me. I'm always pulling Khalil into the conversation when I'm talking about him in front of him. At least I do my best. So anyway, we were at the restaurant. And I was like, Khalil, what do you want? He loves French fries, and so he's can I have French fries, please? And my heart just blossomed because. Now, let me say this. For families raising neurotypical kids, you might think, oh, that's nice. Okay, what's the big deal? But for me and for families who have neurodiverse children, and particularly children who are autistic who have speech delays, you know what it feels like when you see progress in your child, right? It feels like you want to throw a big party. So for families like mine, this was monumental. Spending years in speech therapy and modeling speech and practicing speech and waiting patiently and yearningly for more conversations with your child who is semi-verbal and or experiencing speech delays is a real thing. And so when I heard my son say, can I have French fries, please? It got me thinking. The world celebrates milestones, but many parents raising neurodiverse children spend their lives celebrating progress. And those are not always the same thing. Because when your parenting journey looks different, your victories often look different too. Today, we're talking about the parenting wins that nobody celebrates. The ones that deserve confetti, the ones that deserve applause, the ones that often happen quietly, and the ones that can be easy to miss when we're busy worrying about what's next. One of the biggest lessons parenting has taught me is that growth is rarely dramatic, and it certainly does not happen overnight. I think we expect transformation to arrive with fireworks, but most of the time it shows up subtly and quietly. One extra word you may hear your child say, one new skill that you observe them displaying, one less meltdown that's occurring throughout the year, a new friendship that you witness them build, a new moment of independence, One thing that was impossible 6 months ago suddenly is a part of you and your child's normal routine. And here's the problem. Once something becomes normal, we stop noticing it. We move the goalpost. We focus on the next challenge, the next concern, the next thing we're worried about or that we want to see quote unquote improved. And before long, we forget how far we've come. This also makes me think about the comparison trap that I talk about often. I think we know that one of the biggest thieves of joy is comparison, especially for parents. We compare our child to other children, our family to other families, our timeline to somebody else's timeline. And social media definitely does not help, because nobody posts, my child tolerated a haircut today. I mean, some people do. There's some awesome social media pages of parents who are raising neurodiverse children who are incredibly generous with their sharing in a vulnerable way that I admire. But for the most part, people are not sharing those things. Nobody posts that my child asked for help instead of having a meltdown, right? The things that we truly appreciate because they matter. In fact, for some families, they matter more than the honor rolls and the trophies and, winning the games and sports leagues, right? Because progress isn't measured by how your child compares to someone else. Progress is measured by growth and their own capabilities, right? There's research on motivation and learning that consistently shows that recognizing progress increases persistence, confidence, and resilience, right? When we work on having a growth mindset, it reminds us that focusing on effort and growth and learning helps people remain engaged, even when challenges persist. I've been learning a lot about neuroscience, and it tells us that the brain changes through repeated practice and incremental improvement. And so the more we continue to peel away little by little, gentle by gentle, little by little and gently on the things we want to see improved, the more progress we will see. So in other words, small gains matter, tiny steps matter, and progress then compounds. The challenge is that our culture tends to celebrate outcomes and immediate results. And parents often spend years celebrating process. And that's a very different way of measuring success. So I want to take this moment to celebrate a few right now. That first successful haircut that your baby accomplished, pat yourself on the back and go give your child a big hug because they conquered something huge. That first birthday party, that first sleepover, if that's something that you've done or you're into, first independent task, that first friend, that first time that your child advocated for themselves, that first time they recovered from a disappointment, that first time they ordered their own food, that first time they rode the bus by themselves. When I think about the first time my baby got on the bus his kindergarten year by himself, and I went home and sobbed, some out of fear, but also out of pride for his courage. The first time that they asked you a question, a few years ago, Khalil started asking me how to spell things, and it just made me so happy as somebody who loves words and loves how words are put together. I was like here for it, okay? The first time they, indicated they want to do something by themselves, honey, that is progress. And as a parent, you help them get there. And that is something you should always celebrate and always be proud of. So, no, these things may not be celebrated by mainstream society or by the masses, but we know as neurodiverse parents that these things keep us going, right? And for the parents listening, the victory wasn't what your child did, okay? The victory was what you did. You attended the meeting, you asked the question, you took them to the therapies, you advocated for them, you learned, you stayed the course, you keep showing up. And some of us need to celebrate ourselves too. This is not easy work. So take a moment and do some inventory. Discovery. Ask yourself, what have I overlooked that my child is now able to do that they were not able to do a year ago? What victories have become so familiar that I stopped appreciating them? Now Khalil, repeats everything, and you wants you to repeat everything. Or some of it is, he's a bit OCD. But when I tell you I am so grateful to hear his voice in a way that I was not afforded to in the first few years of his life, I will never forget it, and I never will take that for granted. What have you normalized? Take a moment to think about that. Acceptance means understanding that progress doesn't have to be dramatic to be meaningful. Not every victory changes your life overnight. Not every breakthrough comes with a dramatic story. Sometimes progress looks like 5 fewer minutes of getting ready in the morning, a new coping skill, a successful transition. Honey, those successful transitions from one thing to the other, from the school bus to homework, a good morning, a calmer bedtime routine, like those things are huge and monumental. Because progress isn't always loud. Sometimes it's whispering. And lastly, embracing means learning to recognize growth in real time. I always say, observe your child, observe your child. Everything doesn't require a response sometimes, but always observe your child, because they will teach you what you need to know about them. Not just after. And so that's how you will recognize growth in real time, is through observation. Not after they've reached a destination or a finish line or accomplished a task, but in real time. Because when we become overly focused on outcomes, we miss the beauty of the becoming. And I will not say that I'm perfect at this. Like I have to check myself weekly around the things that I feel urgency around when it comes to what I would like to see for Khalil, particularly around his academics, right? There's some milestones I want to see. Like I need to see him reading more fluently. I need to see him increasing his math skills, right? I'm especially feeling that urgency as he is transitioning into 4th grade, which is wild for me to even say, because I still again remember kindergarten and him getting on that bus. But anyway, whenever I feel that urgency is like he's not at the milestones that I would like to see, I really have to check myself. Two things happen. One, it's okay for me to want that for my son, and I will continue to hold that standard because it keeps me accountable to keeping him accountable. However, it's not rooted in fear. That's number two. It's rooted in hopefulness. And so when I feel that urgency, and I start to become afraid because he's getting older, I stop myself and I say, Ivory, it's okay. Khalil's journey is his journey. He's come a long way. He's making progress. We're going to continue to make progress. What else can we do to ensure that he's making progress? Stay consistent with homework. Stay consistent with increasing his vocabulary, And I just remind myself that this is a journey. This is a marathon. It's not a destination, right? So I want to give you one practical tool today. I call it the evidence journal. Get out a handy dandy notebook. You can even use some of the writing space that I created in the Transformative Parent Journal, aka The Parents Are Not Okay. And write down 3 things that your child has improved upon that they were not able to do in the past. 3 things your child is learning. 3 things you are learning and or have improved upon. That's it. Simple. Because sometimes memory is biased and sometimes we forget where we came from and how far we have come. And when you're stressed, we only remember the problems. We very rarely remember the progress. And so that evidence journal helps us remember the progress. And over time, it becomes proof that growth is happening. Proof that hard work is paying off. Proof that your family is moving forward, even when it doesn't feel like it. I want to leave you with this. The journey becomes lighter when we stop measuring our children against other people's timelines. I wrote that in the Transformative Parent Playbook, and it's something that I want to remind you of. So sit with that. Because I think many of us are living in moments we once desperately hoped for, and we don't even realize it. So, before we go, I want you to think about one win. Just one. One thing you can do today. Just one. One thing that your child can do today that they could not do before. One thing you've learned, one thing you've survived, one thing that you have overcome. And instead of rushing to the next goal, pause. Celebrate what you've learned, what you've survived, what you've overcome. Because the world may not notice those victories, but they matter. They matter deeply. And oftentimes, they are the anchor that keeps you going. And maybe that's what this episode is really about. Learning to see the progress, learning to honor the progress, learning to celebrate the progress. Because growth doesn't always arrive with fireworks. And I'm over here thinking too, who told us along the way that we were supposed to be like the conquering lion all the time, hitting all these milestones all the time? Sometimes progress is quiet and still worth celebrating. So remember, your progress and your child's progress counts too. So as always, take care of yourself. Bye. Hey y'all. And as always, take care of yourself. Bye. Hi, welcome back. Thank you for tuning in per usual.